Hello, folks. It's George Leoniak, and welcome to New Geometry. I'm excited to be bringing you a video today. First one in a while, and I have some great content for you that I've been working on over the past few months. And today we're going to focus on looking at forms as they make their way through various rotations and how that relates to the circle templates that that form arises from. So, as many of you know who are familiar with this channel, New Geometry spends a lot of work on drawing things from different perspectives, primarily the three main orthographic perspectives of the twofold, threefold, and fivefold orthographic drawings. And I'm going to pull that all together in kind of a unified system today to walk us through a rotation of a series of forms as we show how that reveals the different underlying symmetry that shows up as we go around and spin with this rotation. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here and go and to the presentation. So let me open that up for you. And so this is one of the drawings that I worked on over the past month or so. And it's a new spin on a unified perspective. And this is all platonic solids here from a bunch of different views, basically. And the main form that we're going to, two of the forms we're going to focus on primarily throughout this whole list are really going to be the octahedron, which is this form right here in the twofold axis, which I like to call square view. As it's making its way through a rotation here, with this being the vertex of the octahedron facing you directly towards the center of the drawing, as it tilts to the left, you'll see that it's going to go through some different types of circle templates that adjust until you get back to twofold. And then now that will start to work its way around one again, and then back to the original octahedron. Now, we're going to have everything nested within inside this octahedron, and we're going to be taking a look at how the icosahedron, which is this zone model that I'm holding up here right now, how the icosahedron also travels along that rotation and gives us various different perspectives as we work our way around. Now, the rest of the forms on here, we're not going to place much emphasis, but like everything that is all related to this rotation with the octahedron spinning around, all the other forms that are all interrelated and connected to that are going to make their way around. And you could study this drawing and see the various different unique stopping points of a different perspective for each form as you go along here. So just so everybody's familiar, this would be the octahedron line. This line right here is the icosahedron, another platonic solid, which has 20 triangular faces. So you're seeing 7 different views. Of course, the first and the last view are always the same. They're just rotated rotated 90 degrees. This is the dodecahedron. So we have a variety of different views of the form along that. Here's the regular cube. So this is a square, and then you see as this edge shifts around to the center of the drawing and then continues to work its way around till it's back to a square face again. And of course, within every square, there's a tetrahedron, which looks like a square with the line across it. But as we tilt the form, we could see that it's rotating around once again. So the key thing to focus on here is really how this rotation relates to the circle template that underlies the ability to capture that drawing of that form at that particular moment in the rotation. And that is going to relate to the sacred geometry that's associated with that change in perspective that becomes relevant with the circle template at that particular instance in its rotation. Now, there's an infinite amount of stopping places on this rotation. It just so happens that sacred geometry and working with the tools relating to the different ratios and mathematics and angles that show up, these are really the main ones that I've discovered that seem to make the most geometric sense, are these three main orthographic views. But with that, we also get some variety in what the shape of the form, especially the icosahedron underneath it. We'll look at these closer, so I'll save that. We'll look at each of them more closely later to just see the difference between the threefold one here compared to the threefold drawing over here. They're not the same. So you get a different perspective of that form. Now, one thing in this study that I became interested in is we could look at the octahedron as if I had it between my fingers here, and I'm just rotating it along like this, right? Just spinning it around. Now, as I spin it around like this, if I hold it this way, what you're going to see is that there's a square basically going around like that. So this is the two ways we're going to look at this, and I've kind of done both drawings together so you can see what that top-down view and the side view look like. Now, if it's in an octahedron and we rotate it this way, it's going to always look like a square from one vertex to the other. There's not going to be much of a difference there. But as we start to rotate the form and side view orientation, right? So that's as if I'm rotating the form between my fingers this way. As I now hold that in top-down view, as I make that rotation, you'll see that the square is going around like that. So it's not always going to be like oriented, with a X and Y axis there. All of a sudden, we've got these other angles showing up from top down. Of course, we've got the 45 perspective, which is this view right here. And then we keep working our way around and we get various angles until we rotate all the way back around. So that's one key thing to get with these drawings, is just realize we're looking at this same form straight down from this upper vertex, that would be here, looking down at the top of the form. And then as it rotates to the left, this is now what this form, how much of the angle has changed in that rotation. Because that's really key to see and understand what's going to happen here, because as soon as I make that rotation from twofold, which is one little rotation to the left here, all of a sudden I'm in a threefold pattern at this stopping point. And from top down, it just looks like that square is working its way around. But what I wanted to know is, what is up with this angle? So what's the angle here at these other locations that aren't 90 and 45 degrees, which are the obvious ones, right? So what's up with these other ones that are creating the threefold and fivefold patterns along there? The twofolds are always going to be 90 and 45 degree rotation. So let's go ahead and see what I came up with to kind of work through that mystery. So one of the things that I discovered here is that it's going to follow these angles, and these are the angles here that are very specific to these stopping points on these rotations. And I'm going to break this down in a variety of different ways. But in this quick drawing that I did here with my handwriting here, just to kind of capture this quickly as I was studying it, the different angles that show up to the rotation, if we start with the regular square view, the first rotation that comes is 20.9 degrees, and that will give us our first threefold axis, all right, the first threefold axis drawing. And then once we go a little bit further, the next one that gives us the fivefold axis is going to be 31.7, and then we're at the 45 degree. And then that next angle for the fivefold is 58.3, and the next angle is 69.1. That brings us back to the threefold. Now, I know that's devoid of all the geometry, but this is really one of the top-down drawings. It's basically is a fundamental feature that's based on why we are getting these other shifts in the circle template, is based on this golden ratio progression of golden ratio circle radii as we work our way out from zero. So to go to threefold, the first angle that is going to be produced is going to be the 20.9, and that's 0.381, which is basically the golden ratio. 0.618 divided by the golden ratio is 0.381. Then we have 0.618, which of course is 1 divided by phi. Then we have 1. Then we have phi at 1.618 at this angle. And then to get the last angle, which is the last threefold one, well, that's phi squared, 2.618. So the whole rotation, as we work our way around that octahedron rotation, which is also giving us these different circle templates, is all driven by the underlying factor of the golden ratio. Here's just another drawing, and now I've added in the geometry. I'm going to repeat a lot of the things that I just said. So we have a few things working all together here, okay? We have the rotation of the form. Remember, this is now your side view, which is related to the top-down, related to the template, the drawing from the side view. And then we also have what this looks like from above, which is now this octahedron with the icosahedron, which always looks the same. See, here we get different views of the icosahedron because it's side view. The blue is the icosahedron. But from top down, the icosahedron always looks the same, right? So that's a good way to remember that, is we're not really getting different views of the icosahedron from top down view. So we have the different angles that are showing up. We have the golden ratio relationship to where these stopping points are as we make our way through. And then we have the template that is presenting itself to make that drawing, to make that rotation visible to us, or the stopping point, in threefold, fivefold, and twofold symmetries. And within those symmetries, we have different variety of drawings. So we have, in twofold, we have one at the 45 mark that's a different drawing than this one, right? The other twofold over here. So it's given us a different angle of the form to perceive it from. Same thing with your threefold. This is different than the threefold that's over here. So here's the angles once again, and these, this is meant to be viewed as if this line, black line, is connected to this series here. This red line is connected to this series here. The gold line here is connected to the fivefold pattern. 45 line is connected to the twofold pattern here. Gold line, fivefold. Red line over here is the threefold pattern again. And of course, this is when we've gone all the way out to 90 again, which I have also in terms of the length. Now that line just goes, it doesn't really have a stopping point, where these other ones do have stopping points to get that precise angle. They need to be from 0 to 2.618, 0 to 1.618, 0 to 1, 0 to 0.618, and 0 to 0.381. So those are how those radii of the circles are working themselves out. Or that's the distances along this diagram here in these big golden rectangle layout. Okay, so let's just keep breaking this down one more way so you can get a sense of how this is working. And I'll, of course, zoom in on it. But this is going to be primarily just showing this from a few different ways so it makes sense. So now I've taken it out of the rotation progression, and I'm just focusing on the patterns, the fold pattern that's associated with these angles and what they relate to in that that long rectangle that I showed previously, okay? So when we're dealing with the twofold patterns, which are going to be the 0 and 90. Now, of course, the icosahedron will look different in both of those because it's rotated around. So if I hold up an icosahedron and I'm holding it like this, if I make a full 90-degree rotation of this, all of a sudden I have another edge facing me that is not the vertical one, I have the horizontal one. So that's the 90-degree rotation there. Now, if I go just to the 45, and I'm holding this kind of roughly where it may be in my fingers here, then all of a sudden we get the icosahedron in this perspective here. But for the octahedron, that's much easier to see because Of course, here's octahedron. I rotate 45, so then we get the edge view of the octahedron. I rotate all the way once again, and I'm looking basically back at the 90-degree rotation, but essentially it looks just like the octahedron that we had that we started with. So those are all twofold templates, and they're done with the golden ratio circles to draw the icosahedron here. And we also have a twofold pattern here, and we use, but we have a different circles to use to draw this in this layout here. So that's it for this, and that's all done within a square, right? So that's that top down, that's just, you know, the rotation of 0, 45 to 90. Now, when we get to the two golden ratio fivefold patterns, so this is going to have, you know, circle templates that are going to have 10 circles around it, creating a decagon layout in fivefold symmetry. So we're dealing with the pentagonal layouts. We have, it's basically based on a golden rectangle. When these are the angles that the form is rotating, as you can see, this angle right here, 31.7, is the same angle right here that the octahedron is rotated. And then if I look at the angle that is now 58.3, well, that's the same as this angle right here. So that's how much the octahedron is rotated from 0. So these are all going to produce these fivefold patterns. Now look closely at the two icosahedron. Both the octahedron are the same in this drawing. One is just has the vertex pointing, you know, to the left here, and this one's pointing back to the right. That's the only difference between the octahedron. But the icosahedron symmetry, the drawing itself in that pattern has changed dramatically, because here we have a vertex view of the icosahedron, which is the blue form in here. And here we have an icosahedron, which is basically what I used to call a kind of, and I still do call axial view, because I'm now actually holding the icosahedron as if I could rotate it between my two fingers this way, and I'm holding it just like this in that drawing on the left there. And I, you know, it took a while to discover this, but that's basically that drawing, the axial view of it is in fivefold symmetry, that pattern shows up. I used to think it was maybe some other pattern or some other complicated pattern to be able to draw that, but it's easily found in the fivefold symmetry. Now, when we get to the threefold symmetry drawings, these are the angles where they show up. Now, remember, the octahedron, the black square, as it works its way around, those are just, you know, mirror images of each other. They're just, you know, flipped. They're not too different in how they're going to look there. But from this perspective, same. They're not going to look too different, mirror image of one another. But the icosahedron, the blue form, is different. So here we get a face view of it, the icosahedron, in the threefold golden seed of life pattern. And the icosahedron here is now in a view. So here's face view of it, which in my previous drawings, you see me draw a lot like this with the triangle facing this way. But actually, when we follow this rotation pattern that I'm showing and putting it into the octahedron, we're actually looking at it with the triangle pointing to the left there. And if we continue around our rotation there until we get to this spot, we basically have it sandwiched two faces between my two hands here. So I have a face here and a face here. And those two would be as if it were sitting flat on a table facing you like that. So that's the other view we get in threefold symmetry. And once again, I used to think that that was some very complex drawing that I had to do to learn to figure out how to draw that. And I drew plenty of those in my discovery of this simplicity. But finally, I had the breakthrough to realize that those views of the icosahedron are both coming from threefold, just as these are both coming from fivefold, just as these two here are coming from the twofold. So that means you basically get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different views of the icon, 6 different perspectives of the icosahedron in in these 3 main orthographic perspectives. So that's a lot of variety of drawing an icosahedron that make like a lot of geometric sense because the ratios that are upheld in the circle templates are all very united. Okay, so the last thing I just want to illustrate about this is, of course, the angles. And once again, you can follow the red angle here. And of course, that will relate to the octahedron line right here, the edges going in that direction. And then if I follow this line, the 69.1, that's going to follow this octahedron. So you just keep studying these drawings if you're into this and see that this is top down. And then when I look at it from the side, there's where the template reveals itself. So it's rather amazing to think that through this rotation at these specific stopping points, that's really where our templates emerge. They become relevant at that particular point in the rotation that threefold snaps into play right here at this spot. And then fivefold snaps in right at this spot. And then, the twofold patterns snap in at that spot. And then there's a lot of variety in between that aren't related to these patterns that I can tell at this point. So I'll just have a little bit more of a close-up just to walk this through one more time because I know that those images are smaller. So one more way to go about this, and now I'm going to walk through the whole progression starting at twofold pattern, and I have my twofold with the 0-degree angle starting at and 0-degree distance within this rectangle. So we're really starting right here at this line here, okay? And that's what I'm calling 0. And as we work, here's the drawing of the 4 from top down. Remember, all the ones at the top are going to be top down, and here's the associated template. Now, just visualize this one more time. If I'm looking at this top down, I see a blue line going across here, right? So that blue line should be the edge of the icosahedron right here. So that's now looking at it from the side, right? So now we've looking at that from the, top down here. Let me do that one more time, sorry. Top down would be here, right? So I'm looking at this from this line of the edge, top down, associated with this line right here. So if I flip this over in my mind, that would be right here. And that line is going to be not visible to us. It's going to be like straight on to us. So it's just a point. It will look like just a point, and that line goes into the drawing. And that would be this line right here. All right. So that line is going to follow its way around. So at this point, that blue icosahedron, which is underneath the black here, but there's a blue icosahedron line underneath this, is now just going to make itself visible on that rotation. And it's going to look really narrow on this side right there. And as I work my way around, here's the blue icosahedron, right? And now I could see that much of it. And then as I work my way around, there's the top edge. And as I work my way around, there I see a little bit more of it, right? So we got to go through that whole rotation until we see the whole thing. So hopefully that keeps making sense to you. This point right here is associated with that point. So it's a little further. That point is associated with that point a little further. And now the point is finally gone to 45. So, we're seeing an edge, and that's that edge right there, the octahedron. So that's what's going on with these rotations, and these are the variety of circle templates. And of course, this is the angle we're dealing with at this point. This is the angle we have at this point, which is 31.7, until we get to 45. Now, in the next slide, what we have here is I picking up from 45 again, so we could start at that same spot as the previous one we ended with. And now we're going to work our way to 58.3, which is the pentagon, the fivefold drawing again here. And now we're dealing with this line within this golden rectangle, which is the 58.3. And of course, that if this is 0, that's 1.618 the distance. And this would be the icosahedron that we get in this drawing, And then we go a little bit further. The icosahedron is going to be face view at this point. And you could see how that makes sense, because here is the face of the icosahedron, which means that this has to be completely flat to our, basically a horizontal line on our drawing. So if I rotated that, it would be flat in orientation to us, and that's what's happening in that drawing. So this point right here is just going to go a little bit further, and then we've made my complete 90-degree rotation, and now the icosahedron, which started off facing like this with the edges to the sides, right? It was in its kind of long view width orientation, has now made its full transit around to be vertically oriented in its length. So of course that's the 90-degree rotation, and it doesn't have an end mark to its distance. I guess it would be 1 again. I guess you could say it would be 1, but it could be anywhere along here, because this is out to 2.618. But to make it way around here, it just has to go to anywhere along the horizontal line for the rotation. Okay, just remember these squares and things up here, the rectangles, they're not really, they're just showing us the angles. This is not the same size square as these. So it's really kind of more of a top-down mechanism that's working within the form of where these angles are showing up and how they relate to this golden ratio rectangles, which is basically a 1 to, the whole thing takes place in a 1 to 2.618, 1 to 5 square rectangle. To draw that rectangle, the 5 squared to 1 rectangle, there's a cool little circle template that I came up with to do that. And that can draw the extended golden ratio rectangle. Probably other ways to do it, but this is the one that I came up with. And but if you really want to just do a simpler version to just get the angles and kind of do the full rotation, you don't have to look any further than draw a circle template, of course, that I've shared on the New Geometry channel hundreds of times, thousands of times probably, which is just the golden ratio circle square view twofold symmetry pattern, which really unlocks the ability to draw a multitude of forms that I'm not even going to bother showing in this presentation, but I'll show more of the new forms that I've been working on recently too, because this just, once this new system keeps giving more and more and more, once you kind of unlock the key to understanding the relationship of the golden ratio to the multitude of forms that are possible to discover within the circle templates, the lid is lifted off the box so that so many opportunities for discovery are emerge. So this pattern basically is just showing where the rotation patterns are that I've discovered with the angles all the way around here, starting from the 0 out to 20.9 at the blue, 31.7 at this. We have 45, then we have the 58.3, then we're back to 69.1, and we're to 90, right? So that's the whole rotation. And of course, there's, they're forming a square. So we're just going to follow that same repeating pattern. And the cool thing is within the golden ratio circle template here, what happens is to get the correct angle, you're just following the guidance of the golden ratio circles on the circumference of this large circle out here, which is, of course, representing the octahedron, which is drawn at the 45-degree mark to get that circle. So it's really nice the way everything snaps together, and it's all interconnected and related. And here is a drawing that is just highlighting the octahedron squares. I didn't draw the pyramids in because I'm just looking at this as a flat base plane of the squares as they make their way around the this pattern. The black is the vertex facing you, and then of course we work our way around with the blue ones at those particular points. When we're looking at this from the side, those are going to be the locations that we're going to see the threefold patterns show up. When we get to the red in this drawing, that's where the fivefold pattern shows up, looking at the side view of it. And then, of course, this is the 45-degree mark, and that's the edge view of the octahedron. So that's a twofold pattern. So we really have three twofold patterns, that show up, excuse me, and two of the fivefold and two of the threefold. Okay, so I put this drawing together, well, this compilation of drawings together to take us around the full circuit of the whole 24 phases for one full rotation as we work our way all the way around the entire diagram. So this one would be really something great to just kick back and study for a little bit, to really just look at, these octahedron within here are going to be, the same. They're just flip-flopped around because we're seeing a kind of different orientation as the form has kind of made its way out of the rotation. It's now on the backside. So we're going to get two face view orientations as the form starts to work its way now back around the rotation from the last place that it has left off at. So you're going to get some similarities here as you work your way around here in the whole drawing sequence. But this is what the full sequence, and remember, these are the top-down perspectives that you'd be seeing as the rotation kind of works its way around. And these, of course, are the variety of circle templates that are used. And throughout the pattern, we have 8 two-folds, 8 three-fold patterns, and 8 five-folds. And that's because, of course, the cardinal directions and the ones on the 45 are going to account for 4 and 4. So that's 8 two-fold patterns. And then in this little section between a 90-degree arc, we also always have 2 three-fold patterns, as well as 2 five-fold patterns in each of those. So there's an additional 8 as well. And this diagram at the center, of course, is really just showing the rotation of the square itself from where those squares would be. That's essentially all the squares that you see here would essentially make up this pattern eventually if they were outlined within this diagram in the center. But when we add in the octahedrons as we work our way around in the icosahedron, especially the icosahedron, because that's really providing more variety in the circle templates, especially switching back and forth between like vertex view of a icosahedron down here compared to that axial view of the icosahedron, or excuse me, that's also vertex view over there. So that's the whole overview of that whole rotation process and system of how that kind of works its way out as it kind of works its way around the whole diagram. And I want to just talk about some other rotations that I explored in this that kind of didn't make as much coherent sense to me based on how the forms would rotate, and why I kind of decided that keeping the octahedron in this orientation in the twofold pattern and working through all those symmetries in a rotation like this allowed all those patterns to emerge without much complications, let's just say, to the drawing templates. So another way we could do this is if we do a rotation from this standard drawing of having the icosahedron like I typically draw it, and we're going to follow that kind of same rotation into a threefold pattern as well, going down. And if we follow the octahedron and transpose it from this point down to facing us in this orientation, you get this octahedron here, which is a pretty tricky octahedron to draw, but this sets us up to now start to rotate the form from an octahedron that is going to be on its two faces like this, okay? Now, this orientation is essentially what a rotation would be like if the octahedron is inside a star tetrahedron like this. So in this star tetrahedron, we have an octahedron that is doing this same type of rotation here that I'm doing. And when you put the icosahedron in this circle template, we're going to go through and get some of the same drawings, but notice what happens with the actual circle template to square view or the twofold pattern at this point to then draw the octahedron and the icosahedron, because all I'm doing is now rotating the form to that 45-degree mark that I showed you previously from here. So we're just going to get that black edge straight onto us. So we want to just rotate the form, just a little bit to get the edge view like that. And as we do that, what happens is that the whole circle template has to accommodate itself, which is just a tricky drawing to do, because we can draw it that way, but your paper is going to be oriented off to the side. Now, if I continue to do my rotation from edge view here, so I've got my edge view set up, and I am going to work my way around the rotation once again so that I get that edge view of the icosahedron, right? So at some point, I'm going to get an edge view of the icosahedron, just like before. Well, here is the circle template again that is kind of accommodating itself to this rotation that's based on the octahedron rotating around like this. We're still getting a lot of the same drawings, underlying drawings. We're just getting the circle template in an orientation that is, in my opinion, skewed compared to what is easier to draw in the other circle template, in the other progression I showed you previously. Now we're just going through this whole through all these rotations to finally end up at this point where I have my octahedron as a large rectangle here, and the top of the point is here, and there's a point back here on the backside facing me. So there's your octahedron triangle at the top. So I'm finally here, and now we have our icosahedron, and this circle template was a tricky one to come up with. It's a certainly very unique drawing to get. It's not a typical easy drawing to do. But from here, what you can basically do is just keep going through these rotations along here, right? These are the stopping points you'd get that are easy to find. We're not going to get a vertex view of your icosahedron anymore at all from here. So all the five-fold symmetry patterns are out of the picture at this point. We won't get five-fold. We'll get the two-fold, this three-fold. Now from here, what we can do is now that I got my octahedron set up like this, I can once again rotate it vertically, and I can get my octahedron point now at the top, and I'll get my icosahedron within here rotated. And that's basically kind of like this, except what all we've done is just flip-flop what form has been rotated. And I talk about this in a lot of new geometry videos. It's either these two large hexagons, either the black or the blue one. One of them has to take predominance in the drawing to be vertical. And if you have your icosahedron vertically oriented hexagon, well, the octahedron is going to be off to the side. And if you do it with the large octahedron, the icosahedron is off to the side. So one way or the other, you do that. You can do it that way. Now, that's kind of your rotations. You can go this way along here, and then back this way. Now, all of a sudden, the icosahedron is up in the octahedron is the vertically oriented hexagon. So there's some interesting drawings there. It's just not really as fluid and smooth as what I previously showed you here with this progression that just continuously works its way around, picking up 2, 3, and 5-fold symmetry all the way along. And all the capability of drawing, everything I showed you in the previous drawings, is available except for the one drawing that rotates the octahedron to this perspective, which would put it in the tetrahedron, which we could still draw at some point, but it takes a different type of rotation to get that. So that is the rotation from this perspective to this one here, because we don't get a view of the icosahedron in the previous rotation. This is the only place this shows up. So I know this may seem technical and advanced, but hey, as a new geometer, this is the type of stuff that presents itself to me that keeps me engaged on this amazing trail of interrelationships and connections and the process of discovery that I find quite intriguing, because studying new geometry is more really about entering into a relationship, like a real relationship and dialogue with these forms and the circle templates and the interrelationship between these circles and lines and how they coalesce together to create amazing revelations that emerge through a continuous practice of study, artistically, scientifically, intuitively, spiritually, whatever ways that feel called to study it. This geometric this geometric pattern, this pattern language will continue to reveal different fruit for you, specifically for you and your interest. So I'm thankful to be able to be here and share the trail that I've been following, that maybe it will inspire you to look into some of these discoveries, or at least find them intriguing to study as well. So I've simplified this rotation sequence a little bit here with just the compound of the cube and the octahedron now. So I've taken out the icosahedron in the pattern to basically just do a little transit here around this rotation that may be easier for some folks to see than the previous setup that I've showed you. So here's a simplified rotation sequence of, here is your octahedron in blue and cube is in black. And as I start to rotate to the right here, following the vertex of the octahedron, we'll come to the potential to draw a five-fold version of this at this particular location until I get to the edge view, which will be another two-fold version, edge view of cube and octahedron in the compound. At this point, I could continue to kind of do that circular rotation around and again. And it's going to follow the same pattern that I showed you previously, but I don't have the threefold pattern showing up, because that really showed up when I was showing the icosahedron within this, because the icosahedron has a triangular face that has a threefold symmetry that makes it more prevalent to the drawings, but I don't have any triangular faces showing up in this rotation plane anymore. So the only way I get to a triangular rotation plane at this point is once I've got my compound of the two forms. So here's my cube. So I just went like this, and then I went over here to edge view of the compound. Okay, so now I'm here at the edge view. Okay, now I can rotate this way. And if I do, well, then all of a sudden I'm going to get to the hexagon view of the compound of the cube and the octahedron at the threefold pattern here. And as I continue my way around, I'm going to get to this unique view, which puts the octahedron back at the rotation in the star tetrahedron view, let's call it, right? So this is where I'm rotating my little star tetrahedron around this way on the vertices. That puts the octahedron at this point. Well, that's how you get there, is on a rotation. It's moving your octahedron in this plane rather than in this plane, right? So you get the edge view first, then you rotate the triangle view of the threefold pattern to get the triangle of the octahedron. You rotate one more time, and then you finally get to the octahedron in that way. And that's how you get to this pattern that I showed previously over here, which is this one right here with the icosahedron in it. And if we rotate it in this next sequence here one more time, we can get to the twofold pattern, which is now put the octahedron and cube in a conjunction like this, which if we spun our octahedron on its vertices at this point, it would be going around like this. So that's not a, it's a 45-degree kind of rotation happening at that point. So what I can do from here is kind of rotate back to the twofold view, which is this one over here. I can go to my triangle view of the threefold until I finally get back to edge view over here. And then I can go to fivefold view over here. And then I can go finally back over to here. And that takes you through a whole sequence of drawings as you work your way around in this rotation. Preferably, I like the capability of following a different rotation because I'll get to pick up this perspective right here. And I'd like to draw the star tetrahedron from that perspective. But I find it really only useful if I want to work without the golden ratio forms to do that. But primarily, I really like the rotation of the 2-5 twofold version here, in addition to getting the threefold when I include the golden ratio forms at that point. Now, you do get the threefold hexagon view of the cube in the icosahedron. I didn't show you a slide of where that is, but let me just show you just briefly. Within this pattern of the face view here, we'll also have the capability to draw the cube in a hexagon orientation as well. So you really do get all the possibilities that you really would kind of mostly need, or I don't want to say ever need, but you get so much possibilities and potential, in my view, in thinking about it in a kind of unified perspective, to be able to see this progression work its way along here consistently and go through this whole 24 circuit rotation with all the potential perspective views as you work your way around. There's just a lot going on for it. The one view that we don't get within that perspective, of course, is when the octahedron makes that rotation to get to this star tetrahedron view of it that I described previously. That's the one perspective drawing that isn't available. You could draw this there too if you wanted, this view of the octahedron. And we could draw that one if we wanted. But getting this one in the sequence really takes that full rotation of moving the octahedron to the rotation where it's flat like this, and you just don't get that flat at the top and bottom. Two faces are sandwiching between the top and bottom. You just don't get that in this sequence here. It doesn't show up because we're following the square moving around this way, and we never have a triangular face being sandwiched like that on the octahedron. All right, so that's the full rotation discussion, and I hope that you were able to see some relationships and connections. To me, I find it to really be a kind of a unified perspective on working with these circle templates that puts not just the two forms that I've been focusing on, which have been the octahedron and icosahedron, but any form that you want to put within this framework. Most forms, I'm sure there's some super complex ones that are hard to draw, but at least with the platonic solids, you could walk them through each of these and get these very unique views, and also put the geometry into some sort of motion, which reveals various different things that you wouldn't see about a form otherwise. And that is really placing a kind of KNEW spin on how these circle templates are really working in relationship to one another, and that none of them are really in isolation by themselves. And that's the unified perspective. That's the unified view. That's a big portion of new geometry, is pulling across a wide spectrum of what seemingly appear to be disassociated patterns of circles, either radial of 10, 6, or 4, and showing that there's so much continuity and interconnection between them that you're just looking at an elephant from various different perspectives. You know, the different elephant in the room with the blind men around it, pulling on a tail and holding a leg and a trunk, thinking it's all something different, when really it's all just this cohesive whole picture of a giant uh, interrelated series of patterns that will keep you continuously engaged in a very in-depth uh, study and harmonious way of relating to this pattern language. So thanks for joining me for this video. I know it's the first one that I've done in quite a while, but I have a lot of other content that I look forward to sharing soon, especially with some cool new things that are going to be revealed here soon that I'm very excited to share some of the other projects I've been working on. And I'll have an Archimedean solid masterclass coming up. So if this is October, the beginning of October, October 4th, 2024, and you're watching this video as of soon, the middle of this month, I'll be teaching the Archimedean solid masterclass. So check that out. And of course, there's a whole wide array of courses and content over at New Geometry Courses that will get you engaged at whatever level of experience you're at into getting hands-on practical experience of doing these drawings, because that's really where the transmission of the information takes place. And I hope I've done a good job to share some of that with you in my relationship with it. But when you start to engage with it, it will expand your connection to this pattern language exponentially than just listening to other people talk about it, including someone like myself. So thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next video. And please subscribe, and much love and appreciation. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.